We say things like, maybe later, perhaps another time, or I'll see you tomorrow. But for some of us, there won't be a tomorrow. Listen as your worst nightmares come to life. These nightmares have become someone's reality. My name is Justin Crowley, and this is The Murder Project. Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 19 of The Murder Project. In this episode, we are going to be doing the debrief only, kind of going off the same template that we did for the last 10 episodes. Give you 8 episodes, which are part 1s and part 2s. Then we're going to give you a debrief episode over one subject. And then we're going to hit you with the episode of Two Not Cops. So make sure and tune in on Thursday because we'll be bringing you another episode of Two Not Cops. In this episode, we're going to be talking about someone, in my opinion, who's just absolutely awesome. And this case is absolutely crazy. I mean, I can't explain how excited I am to talk about this, and Mike as well, because it does involve murder, as indicated by the podcast name. But it's probably going to be one of our more hilarious podcasts for sure. So this episode is going to be about Susan Kuhnhausen and her survival story. So strap in, ladies and gentlemen. Episode 19 starts right now. My man in the house, Mike Smith. How are you, sir?
I'm doing very well. We've got some good rain going on outside here in the Amarillo. And this case is very exciting. And I heard it, probably a year ago. And I've just been so ready to talk about it because it involves all the things that I like to talk about. And it correlates directly with the message that we're trying to get out there to people. If you have the right mindset, even in a terrible situation, a life-threatening situation, and you put that effort in, and you know that you're trying your best to live, it can be done. This is a good story for that.
Yeah. And speaking of the rain, my little Dugan's Rosie's in the house, so if you guys hear some extra noise, I think Mike said it well earlier. She's just probably going to be a part of the podcast.
Yeah, she is. You're going to hear a lot of egregious, juicy mouth noises because she's got some chops on her.
And she snores a lot. So, okay. So we're going to get into it. Like I said, I'm super excited to talk about this. Got a new microphone set up this week, so hopefully that works out a little better. I figured out a way to incorporate the 2 microphones that we should have been using from the beginning instead of this old rickety thing I bought from a music store that it worked. It worked.
It looked like it was from the 1950s bandstand in Greece.
Doesn't matter. Oh, that's also true.
Oh, yeah.
You're
sorry.
right.
Actually, I'll go ahead and dial that back.
Yeah, so, all right. Susan Kuhnhausen, I want to give you a little bit of a backstory on her. Not a whole lot because the meat and potatoes of this is actually in her heroic act, in my opinion.
That's right.
She didn't have... I guess you could say her life was a little chaotic when she was growing up. Her childhood was a little hit and miss. Her father he was in the military. He was an Air Force cook, and her mother was a homemaker. And they separated when she was a little girl, 2nd grade. And her and her mother, I believe, moved from Colorado. And when I was reading about this, I figured they were probably in Colorado Springs, Colorado, because there's a big Air Force base there.
That's right.
And they moved to Arizona, California, Nevada. And, of course, in situations like this, she shuffled back and forth between schools, homes, and either parent. So that can be a difficult situation. I know, like, changing schools, you talked about that a little bit, I think, before, where you kind of moved around schools a little bit. And it's hard.
Yeah, it is very hard. Psychologically speaking, fun fact, they say that every time you change schools, you go back 6 months in your learning and, like, your social dynamic.
Yeah. And I think that reigns true for a lot of people, but some people are still able to excel in their studies. And I think that's kind of the situation with Susan, because after she graduated high school, she got a license as a practitioner nurse, which I was kind of thinking around here, maybe that might be like a LVN or something, like licensed vocational nurse, like the step, but like right before you get to your full-fledged nursing
possible.
license.
They might just call it something different up there.
Because it said she later went and got her RN.
Her RN.
Yeah. So this was back in the 80s, and she first settled in Coos Bay, and then later in Portland, Oregon.
Beautiful country.
Yeah, you got a lot of you grew up around this area, so.
I did, more in Washington, in like the Seattle area, but I did eventually live on the northeast corner of Oregon. But I did live in Wilsonville for a time as well, but I was an adult by then.
Well, you definitely live closer to Portland than I ever did, so.
Yeah, I imagine so.
So I haven't lived too many places. All right, so after she became a registered nurse, I think she had kind of some hit and miss, and I want to go ahead and point out this article. A lot of this information that we got from is from www.wweek.com, and you knew about the...
Yeah, it's called the Willamette Week.
Yep.
Yeah.
And they had a lot of information on this, so I thought I would just we would use this as our template. But she had a little bit of hit and miss relationships. She was already in her 30s, and she hadn't found love, quote unquote. And so
we're all looking for it, but
yeah, we are. And from what I understand in the research, her mom and her sister perhaps put an ad out in the paper and said that she, because we're talking like 1988, I think.
Yeah.
And so there's no, cell phones, there's no social media, there's no Plenty-O-Fish or whatever.
No, you got to put in the hours.
Yeah. And so they had personal ads, like one ads in the paper, and you could put really anything in there. So you could have a one ad for seeking some company, and
of course.
So they put this in. I'm looking at the actual picture of the one ad, and it says, someone different, single white female, 33, overweight but not over life, seeking a single male who wants more out of a relationship than just slender.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking about that before this. We're talking about maybe not the skinny girls.
No, she doesn't want to be valued for just being what society considers like slender and good looking. She wants to be valued for who she is as a woman. And that's just perfectly fine.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so active healthcare professional enjoys exploring NW. I'm not sure what that would be. Northwest, maybe some sort of interested in conversation, good times, and someone who is intelligent, thoughtful, and full of humor. Must be emotionally and financially mature. Two good qualities.
Very.
And if you are seeking a bright, funny lady who is adventurous enough to advertise, then please reply. And it gives like a little box number that you can reply to.
Right.
So I think this kind of talks about some of the, like, Susan obviously had a good sense of humor.
Yeah, for sure.
She overweight, but not over life.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we'll find out later because I think she was only 5'4". She was a little kind of squattier and heavier set, but she didn't see no problem in it. And I ain't got no problem in it either.
And the right man out there ain't gonna either.
No. And she got a hit on that ad, and it came from a gentleman named Mike. And that's your name.
It is remarkable how often that name comes up.
That name comes up a lot in true crime.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm gonna keep my eye on you, Newton.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be watching you.
I'm sure you will.
So, all right. So she gets a reply, says his name is Mike. He's a 39-year-old divorced white male. And that, I don't know, this, to me, you gotta remember these little things
you do.
For later on.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy most things in nature, from wandering in the ape caves at Mount St. Helens to walking on the beach at sunset.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds like a total crock to me.
Yeah, that sounds so basic. Even for the time, I'm sure everyone everywhere wanted to really enjoy those long walks on the sunsetty beach.
Yeah, I mean, here's another thing I don't understand is I think when you get older, and they obviously might not have done this, but Mike's in this scenario is 39 and Susan is 33. And man, it's getting it out there.
Yeah, it's pouring.
And I feel like Susan is being honest, but perhaps Mike is not being very honest. And I think a lot of this will kind of hinges on the fact that neither one of these two people have even seen each other yet.
Right.
So really you can make up you can kind of say whatever you want to say, but really, in my opinion, the beginning is where you start telling the truth.
That's right.
Because goodness, if it doesn't just snowball in a bad direction after that, especially if you don't keep up with your end of the bargain, which we'll see. Let's see what happens. So on their first date, this is in February of '88. They met at a place that was the
Crystal Springs Rhododendron Garden.
Rhododendron Garden. That's nice. Nice fancy word there. I don't know what rhododendron garden is, but
it's a plant.
A rhododendron.
Mm-hmm. It's a type of like bush.
Do we have them here?
Maybe in the botanical gardens. I don't think that they would grow naturally in this climate.
Okay, so I have an excuse for not knowing what a rhododendron plant is.
All right.
Sort of. All right. Whatever. You know what? Shut up.
They are pretty common in the Pacific Northwest.
Okay. So they went out and they fed some ducks, and Mike had some unsalted peanuts that he fed to the squirrels.
Yeah.
And so
also very common up there.
I bet there's got some overweight squirrels up there. Within the year, they had already fallen in love, and they were headed to Reno to get hitched.
That is quite assuredly the definition of getting hitched, is going to Reno.
Yeah. Mike liked to play slots, and Susan figured that it was no biggie because there's no bigger gamble in life than marriage, so she's good with it.
That is the truth.
And if you guys want, I can try to find some pictures that we can use for the social media page so you can see this doofus, but he's definitely a catch. But you know what? Susan was happy in the beginning because this is what I'm talking about, man. He's just full of lies.
Mm-hmm.
And so, little backstory on Mike. He grew up in Portland, and he was adopted when he was just a baby. And he went to the military, and he says that he saw some combat in Vietnam. And so that was kind of Mike's, just a little brief story on him. But within a few years after they got married, remember Susan's already a RN, Mike gets him a job as he's some sort of manager of custodial, of the custodial department or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's at a really, probably the worst place you could be in a
custodial arts,
a fantasy adult video store.
Yeah, that seems like a pretty icky job. I've been in a couple, and I can imagine that's grody.
Yeah, I can honestly say that in my entire life, never been in one. Not one.
You're missing out, bud.
So, I never ventured in there. I felt weird.
You will.
I don't know. I don't want people staring at me. But Mike had a very interesting quote that he lived by, and I think I heard this mentioned in other places, but he said that life was a shit sandwich, and every day you take another bite until you die.
That's pretty negative outlook.
Yeah, I was about to say, if you feel like everything in your life is a crap sandwich, throw away the sandwich.
You would think
Get
that would
rid
be
of the
easier.
sandwich.
But this goes into what we're talking about with first impressions, of course. He answers the ad by saying that he's full of life, and later on she learns that one of his most popular sayings is, you got to take your shit sandwich life one bite at a time.
Just keep eating it.
And you're like,
yum, 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 yum.
I'm starting to see some of this facade fall away
as
definitely, we get to...
Definitely starting to wear off a little bit. And she figures that out, I think in a hurry. But she also, she hangs in there. They never had any children. And Susan was good with that. And Mike was obviously... Mike's Mike. Anyways, he'd often chain smoked cigarettes while guzzling Diet Coke. And that's...
Yeah, and I'm not joking, y'all. If you see his picture, you can
smell this guy from the picture.
That's right. Yeah, he gets out and he just smells like Marlboro Lights or Marlboro Reds.
Yeah, most definitely. In the shirt pocket, flannel shirt pocket. He's got his cap on. This is past rolling it in your sleeve. Your
I was about
cigarette's
to
in the
say,
sleeve.
see, when he started, it was cool to roll it in your sleeve.
Actually, he had to have started with the sleeve roll.
Yeah,
'Cause
like like a greaser.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then now he is, he's got the flannel shirt. He's probably got the smokes in his pocket, and just living large. Climbing the ladder at the porn shop.
That's right.
He's married to a nurse. She's obviously got a lot of good things going on for her. But Mike was a little bit of a douche in way of he hounded Susan a lot about her plans if she wanted to go out with like work friends or girlfriends or something like that. He was always on top of her trying to say like, hey, where are you going? What are you doing? And he watched her spending habits or her spending and complained about anything, even minor little purchases. And this to me is one of those things where I think there's a little bit of, he's feeling a little inadequate.
Yeah, those are definitely two scenarios of feeling inadequate, because if you really care about somebody, then you're not going to do something like that. I don't think that's healthy for you. I mean, do you want to know where they are? Sure, in a casual way, but you're not going to hound them. And if you're both working in a relationship, you don't get to dog somebody about what they're spending their money on. I mean, you don't want them going out and buying a car on a whim.
Or even, even little. Obviously, finances, we've talked about this already. Finances are a huge thing in marriage because that's the number one reason people get divorced.
Right.
But you can't hound somebody over that. And I think that...
that was just a way for him to feel in control, like he had power. So he could be like, hey, where are you going? What are you spending your money on? I'm the man around here.
Yeah.
Even though I'm almost 100% sure she probably made.
Do you know what I have to mop up for $6.25 an hour? And he's like, hey, I didn't pick your job, pal.
That's probably the one thing that he would have correct, is he probably did mop up some terrible things. But also, back to what I was saying, he probably did not make nearly as much as she did.
Not a
now,
chance.
I'm not 100% sure what nurses were making back in Oregon in those years, but I'm sure it was more than the guys mopping up shower slugs.
Golly, I wish you wouldn't have said that.
Sorry.
'Cause I got my throat. I almost, ooh. So, all right. So they go on this back and forth journey of marriage for like 17, 18 years, I believe. And one day she realizes that she wants to be happy. She can't be living like this. He's always kind of getting down on her. I think that he doesn't feel like he's contributing to the marriage. Oh, and this is another thing that we talked about. All those long walks in the nature and all that got cut.
Yeah.
She doesn't get to do anything. He's hounding her about going out with her friends. He's hounding her about the paycheck or the bank account. He's doing everything. Even when she would try to kiss him, he would just burp in her face.
That is so gross and disrespectful.
Very disrespectful.
But that's when you know that the romance is gone.
Long gone.
Mm-hmm. He's like, real quick, let me chug down this Diet Coke. Give me a smooch, belch. Ha ha ha, gotcha.
Golly. And just, I can see this guy like the Chris Farley whenever he's doing that bit where he's like, he's got the air quotes. He's like, I don't shower regularly.
Yeah.
This guy looks like, sorry, I was doing my air quotes and hit the mic. This guy definitely looks like he doesn't shower regularly, so she's really trying hard to keep it together. And so she decides she just wants to be happy. And in 2005, she's like, yo, Mike, you
got to hit the road.
It's
not
bricks,
working
pal.
anymore.
Yeah. And she kicks him out of the house. And at first, he moves in to his father's home. And Susan never changed the locks or the alarm code. The alarm code was 1210, which was their anniversary, which don't do that.
Yeah, definitely don't. Even if you trust the person, people get weird.
Yeah, and also don't use your anniversary, your birth date, your kid's birth date.
And back then, it probably was still bad, but not as bad as it is now, because every device you have that connects to the internet or the Bluetooth is just recording all of your data.
Yes, all the time. That's why you hear people sometimes whenever you see like on Facebook where they're like, hey, we want to know something about you. And then it's like, do this challenge. And then you just list out 50 things about your life that has your personal information all the way down to what you did when you got married, what your birth date is. I mean, I've seen some that are just crazy amount of personal information that's on here.
It is remarkable how willing people are to do that. And I know they're probably excited to be like, to share that with people that they care about. But whenever you see something like that, guys, you have to ask, do I want Mark Zuckerberg to know this about me so he can report it back to his supreme leader?
Or anybody. That's not as far as I was going to go, but
sorry.
I wasn't going to take it that far. What I was going to say is that anybody can get on there and look at any of that personal information. And if they can cross-reference any of that information with, say, questions that you might be asked to reset your password, a lot of those questions are in there.
That's right. And Facebook and their algorithm, thank you.
Yeah, you got us on the map. Now we're on the social media. They hear everything. They're going to have this. This goes on Apple and everywhere. Mm-hmm. We're under the microscope now, Mike. Appreciate that. Anyways, let's move on.
I'm not sorry.
All right, so let's get into what we're really here to talk about.
That's right.
That's just I want to get you guys caught up sometime. I do that in the part one, but we're just doing the debrief on this one because we want to bring you that two Not Cops. We love doing those.
We do.
All right, so on the evening of Wednesday, September the 6th, 2006, Susan left the emergency room where she worked at, and after her shift ended, she hopped in the car and she went on down to the hair salon to get her hair done. Or hair did.
Yeah, we're gonna call that a glow up.
Glow up?
Yeah.
Nice. All right.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means, but I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, she's trying to get glowed up, man.
Yeah.
She's trying to take care of herself, trying to pamper herself.
As she's waiting for her turn, she picks up a copy of Oprah magazine. Gonna read that, get her some O. And there's a poem inside the magazine, and one of the lines in there that she remembered reading was, "I will not die an unlived life it began. I will not live in fear." And I hope, and she hangs on with this because things are about to get a little hairy.
For sure.
She's at the hair salon for about an hour, which in my experience, I feel like that's not very long. Now, I may be wrong, but when my wife goes to get her hair done, she's gone for like 6 weeks.
But you can tell in some of these pictures her hair is short.
Yeah.
So that's probably why it didn't take so long.
True. All right. Maybe it wasn't, maybe it just wasn't that full. And they have a whole lot of people in there. But she leaves the hair salon. She got her hair done. She's feeling good. Mm-hmm. She's getting divorced, right? Mike's kicked out of the house. She goes in there, and I think she's like, I'm hitting that reset button. Yeah. I'm going to go live life. I'm going to have fun.
Absolutely.
She doesn't say anything about what her future plans are as far as if she wants to find love again or anything like that. But just based off of human nature, I think she wants to feel pretty. I think she wants to get that fresh start.
Yeah, she wants to feel sure of herself. She wants to get back out there. And even if it's just feeling better about herself because she doesn't have that slug weighing her down.
Yeah. She spent the last 17, 18 years of my life with this weasel. And then now, it's time to go out.
Weasel. Nailed it.
Out. And, all right. So she leaves the hair salon. She heads back to her house. She walks in the house and into a mudroom area of the house, which I'm sure are pretty common in the Pacific Northwest.
It certainly is.
Yeah, we don't have a whole lot of that here because it never rains, although we've talked about rain on 50% of these podcasts. This is very uncommon for this area.
It is.
Which I've also already said.
Mm-hmm. All
right, so she goes into the mudroom, walks into the house, finds a note on the microwave from Mike, and it says, Sue, haven't been sleeping, had to get away, went to the beach. And so I guess it says that he moved in with his dad, but she hadn't changed the lock. She hadn't changed the alarm code. My presumption is that he's still coming and going out of the house as she pleases, maybe while she's at work, things like that.
Right, yeah, you can be there while I'm not there. Maybe a lot of his property is still there. Yeah. I'm not sure it's ever really specific about that in what I've read. But
I think they got some kitties in there.
Yeah, I'm sure that he's got some of his property there, and she's like, hey, if you need to get into the house and grab what you need, go ahead. But, when I get home, I don't want you to be there. We're getting divorced.
Yeah, we're separated.
Right, yeah.
And he signed the note saying, love me. LUV, love me.
Mm-hmm.
So
cute.
Yeah, it's really cute. Then Susan unlocks the door into the kitchen, and I saw the mudroom and the kitchen are obviously two separate. In this house, there's two separate rooms.
Mm-hmm.
Goes into the house. She hears the alarm beeping, which means that it's armed, and this will come into play later. She disarms the alarm, walks through the house to the front door. She goes out the front door and to her front yard, gets her mail out of the mailbox, casually goes through her mail like most people do.
That's right. Look at all the bills that they sent you.
Look at all the bills that are coming in. God, hey, I remember when I was a kid, mail used to be like really cool to get.
Yeah.
And so I would always ask my mom if I got mail, which I do. Why would I?
Right.
It would be exciting if you did get a piece of mail, and then you get older. My dad used to say that. He's like, all it is bills. And I was like, he's so out of touch with reality. God, what an idiot I am.
And now when I check the mail, it's me pilfering through, finding something of interest and or necessary for me to look at, and just chucking the rest in the trash. I'm talking to you, Capital One.
Yeah, and then
I don't want your credit cards.
I don't want your line of credit. So I'm sorry. So she goes through her mail, walks back into the house, and she's still in her scrubs. And this is when she goes into her bedroom. And when she opens the door to her bedroom or walks into the door of her bedroom, there is someone in there waiting to greet her.
Yeah.
And it's
what a startle.
Yeah, it's not Mike. So there's a man sitting inside her house, which we'll get to him. We'll talk about him in a little bit. But there is a man in her house. He's got longer hair. He's got a baseball hat that's pulled down, kind of covering his face and eyes. He's got a ponytail, like I said, long hair, ponytail. He's wearing yellow rubber gloves on his hands, and he had a red and black claw hammer.
Yeah, a couple warning signs. Other than a stranger being a man that appears to be a stranger in your house, he's wearing dishwashing gloves.
He literally has on dishwashing gloves.
He's not even in the kitchen, guys. It don't make no sense.
He ain't doing no dishes. And so he gets, this is what I was thinking to myself. She walks in, she sees this guy standing there. Quick assessment. He's got a baseball cap on, nothing out of the ordinary about a baseball cap, some khaki pants, and a tucked-in shirt.
Mm-hmm.
But the rubber gloves
and the claw hammer
going to make me think that maybe there's something a little nefarious going on for sure. So Susan sees this guy standing there, and he obviously is there to do something that she is not going to like, and she doesn't even know why he's there. He doesn't know if he's there to assault her, if he's there to rape her, if he's there to rob her, like whatever the situation. But she figures out pretty quick because he strikes her in the head with the claw hammer several times.
Yeah, he ends up hitting her pretty significantly in the left temple, and this is when she's like, "Oh crap!
Yeah,
this just got real o'clock," and so she decides to fight back. Yeah. And that's exactly the type of thing that we love to talk about, and she does. So she throws her body into him to push him away. But it doesn't work because he muscles back and slams her against her bedroom wall. And that's when he says the only thing he says that as words that night, which we'll hear about shortly, is he tells her, "You're strong."
Yeah. And
that's when she knows for sure that she's going to fight because she decides this guy is here to kill me. She doesn't know who he is. She doesn't know what the deal is at all, but she knows in that moment this guy is here to hurt and kill her.
Yeah. She gets clocked in the temple, and if anybody's ever been hit in the temple, like, man, you get a little woozy. Like, your legs go weak pretty quick, and this is her fight or flight moment. She knows that because of where she's at in the house, this guy is in really close proximity to her. She's not going to be able to flee initially.
Right.
And, that may become an option, but right now she decides, I'm going to fight.
Right. And so she ends up shoving him again. And that's when she demands for the first time, "Who sent you?" He doesn't say anything to that, and they start fighting again. And this is where she manages to wrestle the hammer from him. And she swings it 3 times, maybe 4, to her recollection, into his head. And he snatches the hammer back, and she just goes for the neck.
Yeah.
She just grabs him around the throat.
I think it's interesting. She's like, "Who sent you?"
It is.
Like she's trying
Who does number 2 work for?
Yeah,
exactly.
We were talking about this before the episode started. I was like, when I read that, the first thing I thought of was Austin Powers.
So
like, who does number 2 work for?
For sure. Well, so she's like, "Nah, I'm not going out like that." So she ends up grabbing him around the throat and cutting off his airway pretty significantly because it's reported that his face turns bright red, then purple, then darker purple,
with a blue tinge in a very short amount of time. So that's a grip.
She's got a grip on her. And listen, one of the things that I wanted to bring up is when we talked about the Jeremy Stanky and Jasmine Richardson case, we referenced that when Jasmine's father tried to choke out Jeremy, that was that was the wrong move to go with. And the reason that is because Jeremy had a knife in his hand.
Right.
And so he was stabbing Jasmine's father repeatedly
while he was trying to grab him.
This is a different scenario.
It is, yeah.
This is a completely different scenario because she was in somewhat of control at this point.
At this point, yeah. Their bodies are like pressed up against each other while they're muscling for control. And this is when, he may have gotten the hammer back, but the way I see it happening in my head, like she's got his arm, that hammer arm, and then she also goes for his throat and squeezes it pretty significantly because not a lot of time is passing in this moment, and he starts turning purple.
Yeah.
Pretty bad. Like she's gonna rip that. She's gonna roadhouse this dude.
Yep.
Is the grip she's got on it.
And because of the weapon that they have, this hammer, and the close proximity, because she closed that distance. She closed the distance between the two of them. So even if he gains control of the hammer, or she gains control of the hammer, at this point, because they're struggling over it, you're not going to be able in that close proximity to get the whacks on somebody that you could if they were, say, 2 feet away from you.
That's
and
right.
You're windmilling that thing over into their head.
Exactly. And she takes advantage of that.
Yeah.
And she actually, after she chokes him for a minute, she decides she's going to go to try to flee.
This is her flight. She feels like she's in a position now where she can get away.
So she does, and she splits and heads to the hallway, but he runs her down and grabs her. And this is when he whips her around and he throws a couple of dukes.
Yeah.
Ends up busting her lip pretty significantly. And he gets in another punch that I believe knocks her to the ground on this one.
Yeah.
So she goes back down.
I think she hits the ground, and this is where like we said in the beginning, like she chose to fight instead of the flight. She tried to leave. She was doing everything in her power to get out of the house. And I think whenever she started choking him out and he started turning purple, the reality set in that she could actually kill this guy. Like
right.
She was going to kill somebody. And that is very contradictory to what her profession is.
Absolutely. And I'm
she's
sure,
an ER nurse.
Right. I'm sure in a way that crossed her mind, like, oh my God, I'm going to kill this dude.
Yeah, I don't want to kill this man.
And so she thought she had the upper hand. She tried to flee. It didn't work, but I do want to cover a couple of quotes that she ends up recounting later that I think are very important.
Nice.
So she says that he was standing over me with the hammer. I looked at the floor and I thought, I'm going to die today. And then it goes on to say that she doesn't know how, but she manages to pull him to the ground with her. So this is where she's using her leverage, her weight and her strength. She pulls him to the ground thinking, I got to get the hammer away from this dude. So while she's trying to wrestle for control of this hammer, she's biting him.
Yeah.
Everywhere she can, which absolutely your jaws and muscles and the whole area which you bite with is significantly stronger than people think. And she's not biting just to bite. She's trying to take chunks out of this dude.
Yeah, and I wanted to point out earlier, I forgot to mention this. You got to, we said she was a little shorter. She was a little more heavy set. But listen, this is when you use that to your advantage.
And she did.
She's 5'4". And listen, if you're built like a 1960s refrigerator, you use that to your advantage.
You get it, and she did.
You drop them hips, you squat down a little bit, your balance and everything like kind of settles in. You're not going to be able to knock when somebody gets down that low, it's so hard to knock them over.
Mm-hmm.
You use that.
Yeah.
Use all of that. And she starts doing it. And that's why I think whenever she grabs him and she's able to start pulling him down, like she's going in, she's using her body weight to help her in this scenario.
Absolutely. And it works to the effect.
Center of gravity is in full effect.
And she brings him right to the ground. And so she decides that she's going to start biting this dude, thinking that she's going to leave teeth marks that if he manages to complete the task she believes he is there for, they're going to be able to identify him later by this.
The foresight
That's
of
right.
this woman. She says that she starts biting him because she wants them to be able to use the bite marks to match to her dental records.
Right.
She's being smart about all that in this. And I think, and honestly, my opinion, because she's been in a lot of high stress situations working in that ER.
Yeah.
And she's had to be in these high stress situations, but also keep her mind focused on what she needs to do in her job. And this was easy. It was an easy transition for her to get to this point, because she's also going to do something here in a minute that is that kind of goes into that thought where she's really trying to figure out like how she can put identifying information either about herself or about this person, so that in the event that she does die, this man's caught.
That's right. And so she starts biting him, and it says a few places specifically where she bites his arm, his flank, which I'm assuming is like around his ribs, love handle area, his thigh, and she even bit through his zipper into his genitals.
Bites his penis.
That's right. And
she's going to take chunks out of it. Listen.
So she's gnawing on this dude, and she also has the state of mind that she starts rifling through his pockets.
This lady bit his penis and then starts going through his pockets.
That's right. And she's like, if I find an ID or his wallet, I'm going to chuck it across the room. And hopefully another thing that the cops can be like, oh, wait, who's this guy? What's his ID doing under here? Then they could link him to him if he succeeds. But I got to be honest.
America.
I know. You ain't joking. She's like, not today.
Golly. She's just like, hey, not only am I going to do this, I'm going to rifle through this dude's pockets.
That's right.
Who's thinking of this?
I mean, because she's getting control. She's taking over him right now by gnawing on him everywhere she can get her jaws locked in and rifling through his pockets. And she even has another quote where she says that I was like a downed power line snapping on the pavement.
Nice.
Which, great visual, because I'm sure that's exactly what he thought was happening to him while she's just destroying this guy.
Yeah. And the interesting part about this, like you said, where she's starting to gain the upper hand, you're absolutely correct, because she's doing things that she feels like might help her down the road, or in the way of if she does die, somebody can find identifying information on this man.
Yeah.
What she doesn't know is that, like you said, she's gaining the upper hand and the tables are starting to turn in his mind, but she doesn't know that yet.
Right.
That's why we say, like, don't ever give up.
So
if you're in this fight, you take it to him. And if you die, at least you died fighting. But in her scenario, she's going to start taking the upper hand and she doesn't even realize it yet.
Right. And so it's important to point out that in this article, they mentioned that at this point, the fight has lasted 14 minutes.
That's a long time.
So earlier we're talking, she starts choking this dude. He starts turning purple and blue. In your mind's eye, you're thinking, this is happening very quickly. We even said as much. And then you read,
we're 2-3 minutes in?
Yeah, and minutes in. Fighting is extremely intensive when you're talking about from an exercise standpoint. This lady is 14 minutes in to fighting with this guy that she don't even know. And winning, I'd like to point out. Yeah. That means she's got the stamina, the endurance, and the adrenaline. She's taking this dude apart in the hallway.
She's up on her feet all day. She's walking around that ER. She's doing stuff. What's this? Couch potato.
Mm-hmm.
This guy she's fighting is a couch potato.
And we're going to find that out.
Yeah.
So at this point, she takes like the top mount. She gets on top of him.
After she bit his penis.
Right. After she'd been chewing on him. And she throws her forearm into his neck. And she says, and I quote, "Tell me who sent you here and I'll call you a fucking ambulance."
That
end quote.
Again, America.
Dude.
Listen.
That's one of the raddest things I'd ever heard at the time. I remember I was driving somewhere and I heard that come across and I was just like, what?
She's the one that she now has the upper hand and she's saying, tell me who sent you so I can call you an ambulance.
That's right.
Not the other way around. You came here to kill me. But it's me now that's going to call an ambulance for you. She's still showing this guy sympathy.
Yeah, she was making the meme, call an ambulance, but not for me before it was cool.
That's spot on.
And he responds by growling because I'm sure she's putting a sturdy forearm into his neck. So even if he wanted to respond with something calloused and aggressive, he couldn't because she's choking the daylights out of him.
And that's when he's done. Like, I think that growling is like him also, his airways probably constricted, but I think he realized his goose is cooked.
Yeah, he definitely did not get the upper hand in this situation.
Nah, not at all. And when this is all going on, Susan notices that I guess he goes unconscious, and I don't know if I'm pretty sure she feels like it's from her choking him, but he loses consciousness, and she's pretty sure, because she's a nurse, she's pretty sure that he has just died.
Yeah.
While they're having this conversation about who sent you, and also I can call you an ambulance, the dude dies right there on the floor. And so she runs out of her house, runs to her next door neighbor's house, and her neighbor ends up calling the police and says that they need an ambulance. And she, the 911 dispatcher's like, what's going on? And the neighbor tells 911 that they had an intruder in the house next door. The intruder was in the bedroom with a hammer. The woman who lives there thinks that she might have strangled him. He was down when she left. Now, the 911 dispatcher is like, is she bleeding? And she says, no. Or no, she says that she's bleeding. She's like, yeah, she does have some injuries, but she's okay, or, something along those lines. And then the dispatcher asks if she needs an ambulance. And she says, the neighbor says, no, she's a nurse. She says, call an ambulance for the guy. He may be dead. And that
baller move.
Yeah, that is so awesome that it gets to that point. And there's a little bit more kind of back and forth with the 911 dispatcher, but I think you guys get the point.
Yeah, it's also really important to point out that even though she just escaped this attack, she still wants the ambulance for him. A nurse to the end.
Yep. So after this, the police get involved, and initially, I don't think Susan thinks that it was her husband or that he was involved, because she kind of makes reference that he wasn't around. She didn't recognize the gentleman that was in the house, and she even called her husband, her soon-to-be ex-husband, and asked him to come back asked him to go over to the house to keep an eye on the house, and also keep an eye on the cats or something like that. And he says, that he's at the beach and he can't, that he's not going to make it back. And he's left her the note and all this. And at this point, I think she kind of starts getting a little suspicious, because now they're going to pass all that information over to the police. And then the police are going to go start working on it, because they got this dead guy in Susan's house.
Yeah, and who was this dead guy?
They got a good starting point. So when they go into the house, they find the 59-year-old victim, Ed Haffey.
Yeah, I hate that they have to call him a victim, but I get it.
Yeah, they say he's a victim. He's a 59-year-old Vietnam veteran, and apparently he's got a pretty extensive rap sheet.
Yeah, so, I believe he holds several felonious records.
Yes. And they start kind of collecting information on him. It was strange, because initially the police go into the house. They find Haffey's body on the floor. They get him out. They search the house. They don't really find any clues. But the next day, Susan and one of her friends, Helen, I believe, go over to the house to help her get some of her essential things that she'll need. Because obviously she probably doesn't want to stay in the house.
No, plus it's a pretty active crime scene.
Yeah. So she gets her belongings, goes over there to get some of her belongings, but her friend's like, hey, there's a backpack in your basement, and I don't think it belongs there. This was like the treasure chest.
It was.
Of information with it's going to be in this backpack. And from what I understand, it wasn't, you can look at it as a misstep on the police. But they also said that the basement had a lot of clutter in it. Mm-hmm. And we're assuming that, if you think about it, there's a lot of junk out there. How do you know what's good and what's not? You can say, yeah, you could have opened the backpack, but are they going to go through every single article that's in the entire house and go, no, they probably looked around. Does anything look out of place? No. And Ed probably walked down, Mr. Haffey probably walked down there, set his bag down and walked up. So there's nothing that's in disarray.
Right.
Everything down there looks normal.
Yeah. And the place where the incident occurred, of course, is
upstairs.
And it's obvious.
Yeah.
She's
there's
like,
blood
no,
everywhere.
I went into my bedroom. That's where he was. So it's reasonable to assume that they didn't go down and just rifle through everything in the basement. And is it an oversight? Sure.
And I got to say, there was a lot more blood present than I thought there would be.
Yeah, those pictures really bring it. Like
look up this article because it's got all the pictures on there. You can see Susan's face. You can see the blood that's in the hallway where the final resting spot for Mr. Haffey is going to be.
She must have clocked him a few pretty good times with that hammer because there's some significant blood.
Yeah. So what is in this backpack, Mike?
Well,
that is the question of the day.
Yes. From what I read, there is some diabetes pills. And also a bottle of chocolate syrup.
He's got a bottle of Hershey's syrup in his bag. He's got $200 in cash, and he's got the diabetes pills.
That's right. And
he's Walter Brumley. Is that his name? Was that his name that used to do the...
Wilfred Brimley?
Wilfred Brimley. He's like, I got the diabetes.
Mm-hmm. And if he did, he's chasing down... whatever he's drinking with a bottle of chocolate syrup, I'm going to go ahead and say if that's what he's using to take the edge off, that's not very wise.
Guys, this dude's got it. Why does he have a bottle of Hershey's syrup in his bag? When you're leaving the house, last episode we're talking about phone, wallet, keys. Got all my stuff in there, and he's like, got my Hershey's syrup?
Yeah.
Seriously.
You never know when you got to take a hit.
Seriously, bro. Why does he have Hershey's syrup in his bag?
It's very convenient.
Know what? He's probably like, you know what? When I go get my double fudge sundae, they always screw me on that Hershey's syrup.
And today they're not gonna. I'm gonna drown it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, just drops it on there. And he's got his diabetes pills. This should be a clue to some people right here. Like, listen, don't hire a hitman. But if you're gonna hire a hitman, don't hire a 59-year-old man who carries around a bottle of Hershey's syrup in his backpack with diabetes pills.
Yeah, that seems like a dangerous combination.
The diabetes pills and the Hershey syrup are already a contradiction. However, he's also high on cocaine.
A nearly lethal dose of cocaine, and that sounds staggering, doesn't it? Nearly lethal. But when you're 59 years old, that's not a lot of cocaine.
That could be one bump. You can't do cocaine.
No, cocaine is a young man's game.
Yes.
That's what, you're going to be doing cocaine after 30. You're taking your life one line at a time.
Yeah, you're going to die. Yeah. When I saw this, I was like 59 years old. He's already on the diabetes medication, and he's doing cocaine. And I was like, geez, do you guys not remember hearing about the story of Macho Man Randy Savage?
No.
Rest in peace.
Yeah, R.I.P. an American treasure.
Never. I'm not saying anything bad about the man, okay? But he is older. He was in his 60s when he died.
Yeah.
But when he wakes up one morning, does his natural things, they find a little bit of marijuana in his system. But guess what they also find in his system?
Cocaine.
Mm-hmm. He does a couple bumps of cocaine, hops in his Jeep. He's like, hey, heading on down dies and crashes into a tree.
Yep. Just croaks it.
And we lost the Macho Man Randy Savage. Get out of my house. This is crazy. Yeah. Near lethal dose of cocaine in the system. So if you tie on the fact that he is older, not in shape, cardiovascular wise.
No, definitely not.
He's on cocaine, and he's in a fight for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
His heart rate had to be through the roof.
Yeah, especially when he started losing.
Yeah.
Because now he's panicking.
Yes. And he is being choked, but it's also a good possibility that he has a cardiac event before he succumbs to the strangulation.
Yeah.
And I think that's really, and that could be what it is. I didn't find that exact information, but I got to feel like that's definitely what probably could have killed him.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Mr. Haffey, like we said, he had a little bit of criminal history. And before this, 15 years earlier, do you want to take a guess at what Mr. Haffey was arrested for? You already know, but it is solicitation of murder.
No.
Yeah, so Haffey is hired to kill somebody after he got out of prison 15 years before for hiring someone to kill his girlfriend. Now, unfortunately for the girl that Haffey was dating at the time, the hitman that he hired was successful in carrying out this attack because his girlfriend was found later on after all this in a river, and Haffey was sentenced to prison for this event. But do you know how much time that Mr. Haffey got in prison for conspiracy to commit aggravated murder?
How much?
9 years. 9 freaking years.
Sounds reasonable.
9 years, and it was successful. Let me tell you something. You live in Texas, that's it. You go, if I remember correctly, the very first episode we did,
That's right.
Dr. Saunier gets murdered.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what? Life in prison without the possibility of parole for old Dr. Mike Dixon. That's another Mike. Now,
Keep bringing that up.
yeah, I will. And he gets 9 years. He gets 9 years, and then he gets an opportunity to get out of prison, restart his life over. But unfortunately, instead of going on the straight and narrow, he becomes a scumbag. He has several possession charges on his record.
Yep.
Like we said, the felonies and all this stuff. But interesting enough, they find a daily planner also in his backpack.
Yeah, just a little planner.
Yeah, got something interesting in there.
Sure does.
2 days before the murder happens, on September 4th, he has got a note that says, "Call Mike."
Mm-hmm.
Now, maybe they were calling about catching a baseball game or something, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure it's completely possible.
Maybe they just have a weekly telephone call scheduled because they're friends.
I mean, we meet up weekly, so there's nothing weird about that. I mean, we're doing a podcast, but whatevers.
Yeah.
Now, after they figure this out, they find that Mike Kuhnhausen had hired Mr. Haffey to clean the floors at that fantasy adult video store. So now you got a direct link.
Yeah, that's an affirmative link in every essence of the term.
Yeah. And this, man, when they go and ask Mike about Ed Haffey, he claims that he does not know him at all.
Yeah.
And they're like,
he didn't think about that one for a couple of seconds, did he?
So, Mike, we looked at his employment history, and he works at the same place that you did. Because I believe he lost his job. I think I forgot to mention that earlier, but
Is
Mike,
that right?
Yeah, Mike had lost his job at the. I don't know what you have to do to lose your job at an adult film store. I'm not saying anything bad about the business in general. What I'm saying is he just late all the time? Like, what's the situation?
We can safely assume that if you're in the custodial arts and you get fired,
you wasn't cleaning.
You wasn't cleaning.
Yeah. So he goes to this situation where Mike hires Ed Haffey and says, "Hey man, you looking for a job? I can give you a job.
I got one for you."
Yeah.
It's also, in my head, I see it playing out like they were cracking a cold one, and he's like, "Man, I got this problem. I need it taken care of." And old Ed Haffey's like, "Man, I got street cred.
Yeah.
I killed someone once."
Yeah. I didn't, but someone else did.
Yeah.
But I asked him to.
Yeah. I was hired. I arranged a murder for hire plot, and it worked out, man. It's real easy.
It was really successful. The girl died, and he's like, "Yeah, and you got away with it?" And he's like, "For a couple of months, I did go to prison, but I mean, in my opinion, we got the dub."
Don't worry, I got a perfect plan.
Yeah, actually, now I'm better prepared for the situation.
I'm sure
because I know what the faults were in the last one. Because I spent 9 years in prison for this.
Mm-hmm.
So Mike hires Ed at the adult video store to work there. They hatch this plan, and obviously they figure out that Mike was involved in this. He knows Ed. That whole part of the story is completely busted.
Yeah. And
while they're working, I guess they're trying to work up a warrant on Mike. He leaves the area. He goes and buys a Taurus 357 revolver, I think, and he leaves a suicide note saying that at his dad's house. And basically, it's like one of those deals where he's saying like every time he has something good in his life, he messes it up. Those aren't the exact words because I just don't want to say it. But
yeah, he's feeling very pitiful.
Yeah, feeling very sorry for himself.
Yeah, it didn't work out, so now he's like, oh, now I suck at everything.
Yeah, he sucked. His whole life's just a pile of crap. And then they found out later that how Mike had told Susan that he had spent time in Vietnam. He did time in the war.
Mm-hmm.
But he was a telecoms. No, I'm sorry. He was a switchboard operator.
Switchboard operator, that's right.
And so I was going to ask you about that in particular because...
Yeah, shockingly common. People like to do stuff like that, probably because it sounds cool. It makes him feel cool, and if he doesn't have anybody in his life that can say otherwise, the average person is going to believe him.
Yeah.
He's like, I went to Vietnam,
And then someone casually goes,
They're like, oh, you saw the war.
you saw some action? And he just 1,000-yard stares through a drag and goes, yeah, I saw some shit.
Yeah, you don't.
And who's going to question it?
Yeah. They're like what? He's like, I don't want to talk about it. And they're like, you got it, man.
But the
Out of
reality,
respect, but
the reality of the situation is he was a switchboard operator that more than likely didn't see anything.
Yeah. Now, the police, after this, find Mike. He is at a medical center, and what he claims was, and we brought this up in another episode before, but he claims that he is there to check him in for a mental evaluation because he tells the officers that he has nothing to live for anymore. And you can't check yourself into the mental hospital after be like, you know what? Things got really bad back there. I think I need some help.
Mm-hmm.
Bruh, it's too late.
Yeah. You made your bed, bud. Now you got to sleep in it.
Yeah, why? You can't do that. You can't show up later on and be like, hey, by the way, I think I need some help. And they're like, okay, what'd you do? And he's like, oh, I hired my buddy to kill my wife. And they're like, oh my gosh, is she deceased? He's like, actually, she put the whooping on my buddy, and he is dead.
He didn't make it.
He did not make it.
Yeah, so he ends up getting arrested for conspiracy to commit murder because he put up $50,000 for old Ed Haffey.
Yep.
To try to take down Susan Kuhnhausen.
Yeah. And where was he going to get this money? And that was one of the interesting things because he didn't have a life insurance policy on her, like what we would typically say, okay, what are some of the reasons? Is it money? It usually is, or maybe, he's mad at her because she's divorcing him, but they didn't have anything set up like that. But what they did have was a paid off house.
That's right.
And so if something happened to Susan, Mike was going to get this house willed to him, and it was worth about $300,000.
Mm-hmm.
So $300,000 that he was going to get. So he told Ed that he'd give him 50 G's if he killed his soon to be ex-wife. And as we saw, that did not work out. But after Mike was arrested, and there was some other information that kind of goes back and forth with, Ed was going to hire another guy to help him out and do, he was going to give him $5,000, and there's some kind of smaller details in there. But
a lot of subcontracting in the hitman world you'll learn in the world of true crime.
But I don't think that kind of ties into the story directly.
Not really, no.
Susan, being the bad A that she is, she filed for divorce the day after Mike was arrested. Because when the cops showed up, he's like, I'm coming to get some help. And they're like, too late, bud.
We're already here for you, bud. Yeah. We got some help coming.
So they take him to jail, and Susan files for divorce right after this. And, in my mind, I was thinking that Mike is going to get this terribly long sentence.
Mm-hmm.
And because Susan even says that she is doing a life sentence for picking a bad husband, which I think is really sad because she's the survivor in this situation, and her husband is going to obviously her ex-husband is obviously going to be going to jail. So after all this is said and done, and Susan has to live with this for the rest of her life, Mike gets 10 years in prison. 10 years.
Yeah, that's it for soliciting aggravated murder.
Yeah, I can't, guys, I'm really confused on this.
And don't worry, if you're thinking that sounds ridiculous, that's because it is. But guys, the laws are written the way they are, and if they're not brought to attention and you get people talking about them, you're not going to affect any change. And as we've seen over the years in many different states all around the nation, you can get these things changed. I'm sure by now, I actually don't know the answer, and I do think I need to look that up, but I believe that those charges those penalties are much higher now.
Yeah. And
probably because it's surprisingly common how often people try to solicit murder.
Yeah. So Susan has to live with the fact that her ex-husband is going to someday get out of prison.
Yeah.
And she thinks that he is going to still be a direct threat to her. And Lord knows, I understand why she's saying this.
Yeah, that's pretty scary.
Now, fortunately for Susan, about 54 days-ish, I believe, before Mike was scheduled to be released from prison, he died.
Yeah, I believe it was from some type of cardiac event.
I hope so. Actually, that was probably too easy. I kind of wish something else happened to him, but we'll take it as a win either way.
Like an anvil fell out of the sky, or anything else.
He fell and hit his head on the toilet.
Yeah,
classic with force. Yeah. Something along those lines. But he has that, and she was a practicing nurse for a long time after this. She's still alive right now.
Yeah, that's right.
And so I think it's definitely a shout out to Susan and anybody, especially if women in a situation like this. If you stand your ground and you come out the victor, that's awesome. I think it's really cool.
She made up her mind. I am not gonna die and not leave my mark on this jag-off.
Yeah, and
she put everything she had into it, and that's all it took.
Yeah,
she made up her mind. This guy's trying to kill me. I gotta try to get away. Okay, that didn't work. Now I'm just gonna give this dude hell. Biting him, looking for identification. These are all the things that,
when in doubt, bite the penis.
Dude, she did. She was biting him all over. She was gonna wreck that, and she did. And even still, I'd like to point out again, she ran to the neighbor for help for him.
Yes.
Bad to the bone.
For him. She went and called him an ambulance.
Yeah.
That's why when we heard about that, we're like, dude, we got to talk about this because that really says a lot about Susan and her ability to survive. And it also says something that she obviously is probably suffering from some trauma from this event as a survivor. And I hope that everything works out well for her, that she's been able to process through this event.
She has done a lot of good with this experience. Helping others with this type of situation, setting up like programs for victims and survivors of incidents like this. So not only did she put in the effort to be a survivor, she also went on to tell her story and share that type of mentality to other people that may have been in similar situations, and to talk about, just get the information out there. If you can survive this, you can put force back against an equal to or greater force and come out the victor. And that's a wonderful message. She could have ran. She could have just tried to flee the whole time while this guy battered her to death with a hammer. But that's not what she did. She's like, nah, I ain't going out like that. And there was a good chance she very well could have, but it's not the way it worked out. She overpowered this fool, took him down, strangled him to death in her hallway with her forearm, while screaming that he needed an ambulance, and then went to the neighbor to request one for his carcass.
Yeah.
So that's great. I think that's phenomenal. And that's something that we really like to talk about here at the Murder Project, is that type of mindset does wonders.
Yep.
You are not going to be a victim. You're already in a crappy situation. God forbid you come home and find somebody with a claw hammer waiting in your bedroom wearing yellow rubber gloves. But if you do, and you can't get right away, just give that dude hell.
Yeah.
There's quotes like that in many different versions of pop culture. But if that guy's going to kill me, you're going to make that person remember that they had to kill you, because you're going to tear him up.
Yeah.
And that's fantastic.
Yeah, Susan does not need our approval, but hey, we salute you.
Yeah, for sure.
That's amazing.
Yeah, fantastic job, Susan.
Yeah, thank you very much for giving us that story to tell, because I think it'll help a lot of people out. So, do you have anything else?
No, that's it.
All right, well, I think we're going to close it out for this episode. Y'all remember, Stories of Two Not Cops are coming next. Mm-hmm. So, we'll see y'all later. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in and listening to the episode. We really appreciate it. We have seen that the numbers are going up, the podcast downloads are going up, the subscriptions are going up, and we are super excited because we want to keep bringing you the content. If you're looking for us on any of the social media platforms, you can find us on Facebook at The Murder Project. If you need to search for us, type in facebook.com/podcasttmp. If you're looking for us on the old Instagrams, we are at The Murder Project. And if you're looking for us on Twitter, we are at The Murder Pod. Also, a reminder, please, everybody, go on to whatever platform you listen on, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. If you're listening on Apple Podcast, hit that 5 stars, hit that subscribe button, leave us a review. We've seen that several people have done that over the past couple of weeks, and we are super pumped, and we'd like to read some of those reviews as they keep coming in.
Mm-hmm.
So please do that if you can. we're going to leave it there for this episode, but make sure and tune in to the next one. It should be a good one. Mike and I are going to bring you the stories of our past law enforcement experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So we will see you guys on the next episode. Can't wait to talk to you guys again. But before we go, please remember,
head up, eyes up,
and stay alive.